lived in the Ukraine and Siberia. And he sometimes worked as a propaganda artist, although artists in Russia were not given much freedom to be artists, correct? Right. He created posters for the local party committee in a small town, and he was told exactly what to put on that poster and what colors to use and how to do it. But, you know, it was using he does have the talent. And after the fall of the USSR, Oleg says he witnessed the transition of the republics of the Soviet Union from corrupt socialism to corrupt kleptocracy. When he arrived in the U.S., Atbashian was puzzled by the level of delusional affection for all things left among the liberals, intellectual elites who take America's exclusive well-being for granted, and he dismissed this delusional affection as silly and of little consequence. Then 9/11 happened, and he witnessed that from the base of the Twin Towers. He worked like across the street from the Twin Towers, and he was a little late that day getting to work. And he says, quote, "I'm still haunted by the horror I came to be a witness of. The subsequent blame American attitude among the intellectual trendsetters enraged me, and liberalism no longer seemed laughable. It was dangerous, suicidal madness that had to be confronted. I took up political activism. Oleg's activism blossomed into the satirical street theater group Communists for Kerry. Atbashian says that
2004.
yeah, in 2004, there was a 6-member group, and where was it that you?
New York. You know, the left organized a street theater group called Billionaires for Bush, and they were quite popular among the liberals. They were making a parody of capitalism, and were presenting all the billionaires, the rich people, are the ones voting for Bush, and as this immoral, corrupt crowd. So my friends and I decided to do the opposite and do a Communists for Kerry group. So we dressed up as communists, as Lenin and Castro and Che Guevara, and we would stand on Union Square in New York, which is like a hotbed of all the leftist agitators. And we were promoting our comrade Kerry for president, and some of the New Yorkers took us, you know, they realized that we were a parody and they were very angry. Others took us for the real deal. And they would come and congratulate us. Even 2 DNC workers came over and shook our hands. So they were so glad that, and they took a picture of themselves with us, with our guy dressed as Che Guevara. Now this guy dressed as Che Guevara is running for Congress from a precinct here in Florida, because he came back to his hometown. And what I keep forgetting, Brooksville, Jason Sager. So if anybody heard of him, he used to be Che Guevara, and his establishment Republican opponent in the elections was plastering his picture dressed as Che Guevara all over the town, showing how silly the candidate is. But without the context, you know, he was making fun of the left. He was being an activist.
Come up, Oleg, you need this microphone. I hand the microphone to you. Thank you.
Also, are you finished? I don't know.
Yes,
Well, thank you very much. And as Beth mentioned, I grew up in the USSR. I was born in Ukraine, and I used to believe in communism, as all the Soviet children did, because we didn't know any other sources of information. We were told by the teachers, by the media, by the movies that that's the only future for humanity. The beautiful society where nobody would need any money to live, some mysterious entity would be taking care of all our needs, and what's not to like? It's like childhood forever, extended childhood for all. So it seemed such a wonderful thing, and we also knew from our teachers and the media that the rest of the world suffered from this dark capitalist oppression, and America was the worst country in the world, where the rich capitalist pigs were exploiting the poor people, and there was this rampant corruption and crime and police brutality and oppression of individuals who were thinking differently. And we all wished that all other countries would be more like us. You know, that America would have its own revolution and be more like the USSR for their own good. And that's what we believed, but as I was growing a little bit older and began to understand better, I saw how our own system was corrupt and hypocritical. And at first I attributed it to the wrong, I thought that just the idiots are in power and they're carrying out the good idea in the wrong way. And that's what a lot of leftists here in America also think, that the idea is so good, it's just that it needs to be implemented correctly. It has never been implemented before the right way. They think they're the geniuses who will pull it off. All the other people were stupid. Now, we all remember how the media were presenting Obama's cabinet as the best, the smartest people of all on earth. They were all a team of geniuses. Now look where we are with those geniuses. Now, rebuilding the society based on new socialist principles is something they think they can pull off without the crimes, the abuses of Stalinism or any of the dictatorial regimes that usually follow a communist revolution. And my message is that I grew up without seeing the Stalinist horrors because I was born in 1960. And that was over, and the country had been more or less liberalized, you know, relatively speaking, of course. It was still a dictatorship. It was kind of a soft dictatorship, so I didn't experience the horrors. But still, the system that existed was so deeply immoral that corrupted human minds and spirit and everything that makes us human. And that's what I'll be talking about, and that's what my book is about, The Shade on Socialism. And I wrote it as a response to a big number of letters from my readers in Pajamas Media who read an article that I wrote earlier called Obama the Pitchfork Operator, the remake of the Soviet classic, where I described the story. You know, if you remember how Obama mentioned once that he gathered leaders of financial industry in his office, and he told them, I would be careful what I say if I were you, because I'm the only thing that stands between you and the pitchforks. But he is the pitchfork operator. He's just holding them and he directs them. The pitchfork represent the ACAU, the unions, the leftist protesters that are working under the leadership, okay, not directly, but under the leadership of the same leftist forces that put him in power and financed by George Soros. And that reminded me of the tactic that Joseph Stalin used in the USSR in order to squeeze foreign investors who were coming to the Soviet Union. They invited them on purpose, knowing that they would later harass them with the unions, organize artificial strikes, and push them out, and the investors would leave, leaving the equipment and the trained labor force behind. And they pulled those tricks several times. And it's similar to what Obama was doing. So I wrote the article, and it was quite popular. People were asking me about the roles of the unions in the USSR and what happened to them. And then I started answering that. And then I described the whole history of the Soviet Union, how they helped the communists to come to power, because Lenin called unions the school of communism. And I'm just saying why it is so and how it works. And then later, when the communists did come to power, they took all the rights away from the unions. The unions were absorbed into the state, they became completely powerless, and so the workers lost all their rights and could be abused by the government any way they wanted. The unions didn't say a word. And that is the fate of any group that comes into competition with the government. The unions are clamoring for the advance of the big government, and they probably do not realize that they're ushering their own destruction, because when the government takes over the functions of the unions, regulating labor relations, salaries, safety, and they're already doing that with OSHA, with all the other regulations, you know, the state regulations, the government regulations, the labor relations and the salaries,
are largely regulated already. So those are the original union functions. The more the government takes the union functions, the more redundant the union becomes themselves. And once the government becomes powerful enough, the unions will be in competition and they will be subdued. Also, the unions don't realize that their old perks and benefits are good as long as there is something to redistribute. Once there is nothing left to redistribute, that will amount to nothing. Because like in the USSR, when they redistributed everything, and they used up everything that they redistributed from the rich people before them, there was nothing left. And they were left dirt poor, living in crammy apartments that they took over from the rich but didn't build any new ones, working in the old factories with old equipment without building the new ones. And whenever something would go broke, the equipment would break. The government, of course, would find the guilty ones, and the guilty ones were either the old managers from the previous years, from the capitalist system, so they would be either prosecuted and sent to jail or even executed. Then the next ones were anyone working at the factory who had this ancestry of people who were considered rich. So they were also then persecuted, but things kept falling apart. Then the government realized that the only way to make people work was to take away all their rights. So the labor code, that was pretty lavish at first, was hidden under the carpet, and nobody saw it for several decades after that. And already in the 30s, the workers had absolutely no rights. They could be sent to jail for being late, for not coming to work. If you're just a regular drunk and you're having a hangover, that could be criminal. That would be a crime against the state. Right now, it's between you and your employer. When the state owns everything, you're committing crime against the state if you are doing something wrong at your job. So that's the consequence of having nationalized everything. So where I'm going with this is that well, there are quite a few points that I wanted to make. Which one would be the first? You will read in my book, if you buy it, the rest of the story, how the unions became the voiceless puppets of the government. And everybody was a mandatory member of the unions because everything was owned by the state, and everybody was automatically a union member whether they wanted it or not. And I changed different jobs when I worked in the USSR, and every time I was assigned to a union, I didn't know even its name. There was no paper to sign. I was automatically a member, and my member fees, dues were extracted from me even before I saw the money. And we just had a workbook that was transferred from one enterprise to another, and that was our resume. But it was filled out by government officials, not by us. And it was all our work record, where we worked, for how long, what we did, some comments from the management. That was all recorded, and we had to keep that book for our entire lives so that our salaries and pensions would be calculated from that. And then if you wanted to do something that was not in a category that could be put in your workbook, then it's not considered a job. Like, for instance, there was this famous poet, well, he wasn't famous at first, Joseph Brodsky, who later was exiled, and then he became he received a Nobel Prize for Literature in the 80s. But in the 60s, he was writing poems that were not exactly sympathetic with the Soviet leadership. So he got arrested for being a parasite. They told him, "Why aren't you working?" He said, "I am working, I'm writing." "So you're a writer, are you a member of the Writers' Union?" "No, we're not, I'm not." "So how can you say you're a writer? Are you published?" "No, I'm not." Of course, how can you get published if you're writing something that's against the government? So you're not working then. Then it's not in your workbook. You don't have that record. So you're a parasite. And when the right to work is written in the Constitution, it means that the government has to track you down and know where you work, and if you don't work, assign the work for you. And if everything is shared by everybody through the government, then the government is making sure that everybody does his or her share. In America, I have friends who have saved up enough money and decided to retire early and pursue their hobbies, either art or writing or doing whatever they want, because it's their business, it's their money, I don't care. It's not my business to ask them how they live and where they get their income. Now, imagine if we all have to contribute and the government redistributes services to us with all the healthcare, apartments, work, education, and all the other things. Then they consume as much as everybody else, but they do not give anything back, so they become parasites. They become leeches of society automatically. So I would have a different attitude towards them in a different ways. In that case, I would not think of them as such great friends anymore. I would think of them as leeches. And so that's how this very system of making people share everything through the government already alienates people one from the other. And that the left likes to claim, it's like the famous Marxist cliche that capitalism alienates people. But nothing alienates people more than socialism. Because when you share everything, you have to look over everybody's shoulder and see how much they're making and whether they're not slacking off. And you yourself will be slacking off because you'll be stupid to work hard if everybody else is slacking off. And you will be expecting to live off somebody else's harder work while trying to work less. And that is normal, it's in human nature. You just don't put people in a position where their human nature would lead to such a negative effect. And the American system, so far as it existed before Obama, at least, or, you know, it started not with Obama, of course, but the traditional American system was conducive to the human nature calling, what's the right word, not forcing us, but being conducive to us acting in a way that would bring up the best parts of the human nature and be friendly to each other and work harder and contribute more and enjoy the fruits of our labor. So anyway, this is about sharing all the fruits of our labor through the government and how it affects the people. I can... Louder? Okay. I can give you an example of... I went to my son's school in Brooklyn, New York, to meet with the principal once, and I was waiting for her in the lobby. And I saw a big billboard in the lobby that was filled with compositions written by 12-year-old children. And the compositions were titled, "How I Would Change the American Constitution." And I was surprised at the title itself, so I decided to read, and most of those compositions had proposals to include the right to work, the right to housing, the right to free medical care, the right to education. And then the principal showed up, and she beamed, and she said, "Isn't that nice how great our kids are, how smart they are that they wrote all those things?" And I said, "I don't think it's so great because all those things were in the Soviet Constitution and it didn't do anybody any good. Why put some garbage into the children's heads and make them rewrite the American Constitution that works fine?" She said, "Well, nobody put that into the children's heads. It was their own, they wrote it out of the goodness of their hearts, and it's a shame that some parents don't share that goodness with them." And I said, you know, I was a 12-year-old once, and I know that right to work was not something I was worried about, or right to healthcare or special education. So don't tell me that, no, that they did it themselves. And she said, oh, what's wrong with right to work, and what's wrong with right to housing, and all the other things? I said, okay, if you provide, if it's, all those things are written in the Constitution, and people have the right guaranteed by the government to work, have housing, free healthcare, and education, then the government's responsibility will be to provide it to them. And in that case, the government would have to track everybody down and see how much where everybody lives, how much everybody spends, how much everybody earns, and also, instead of people paying freely out of their pocket for the services that they choose, they would become beggars, asking for a government official to give them a favor. And whatever services the government provides in bulk are of an inferior quality. And so we will be taxed to get those services provided to us through the government bureaucracy, which would be more expensive. So we'll get a more expensive service that would be of lower quality, and the relationship between the people and the government would change. Instead of being free owners of the country, we would become the subjects begging for a favor. And as with anything that government does, good things will be in shortage. So the government bureaucrats would be deciding who gets what first. So, and that would spread corruption, because the government officials would then be paid off to choose who gets the apartment first, who gets surgery first, who gets education and where, who gets admitted to the university and who doesn't. And those things happen, like especially in Asian republics of the USSR, like in Azerbaijan or in Uzbekistan. I had a friend from Baku in Azerbaijan. She gave me a price list to get your child into a university to become a teacher. Was the least expensive. It was 20,000 rubles. To become a doctor was 50,000 rubles. To become a lawyer was 80,000 rubles. So that's why the locals never would go to the local Azerbaijani doctor, because they knew that those diplomas were all paid for. They would go to a Russian or to a Jewish doctor instead, who got their education elsewhere. So that's what we get from all these rights that are written in the Constitution. Now, I thought at first and after that conversation with the principal wasn't convinced, and she was getting more and more angry. And after that, my child started having problems in school. And I thought at first that this was just some isolated incident in this Brooklyn public school. But then I realized that it was not an incident, it was the policy of the goal of the Department of Education federally was to indoctrinate children in that manner. And that whole think tanks were working towards that effect. And we all heard the name of Bill Ayers, you know, the respected educator, former terrorist, who is writing books about how the teachers should teach socialism in the classroom. He actually writes instructions for the educators, because he's educating the educators. You can go to Bill Ayers' website and see it for yourself. He's not hiding it. He's got the Red Star and Che Guevara's picture on the front page. And if you go to the list of his work, you will see what they're all about. And it's all official. Obama was working with him on reforming the Chicago education system using money given by a Republican foundation. And the Republicans, the conservatives are the tolerant ones, actually. It's the liberals who are intolerant, usually. Whenever they get anywhere, when the conservatives let them in, they push everybody else out, and they only leave their own kind. And that's why the education system, the entertainment, the media are all liberal. Somebody reminded me about that school story that I told you earlier. And I forgot to mention that later I learned that at the Brooklyn College, at the school of the teaching school, a requirement for to be accepted there is an interview where you have to show your adherence to social justice. And we all know that social justice or economic justice is just a code word for socialism, because they also like to use the word economic equality, and we see that a lot at the current Occupy Wall Street protests. And economic equality means redistribution of wealth. I mean, economic justice, they also like to say, that means economic equality, that means redistribution of wealth. Logically, that means that justice in their minds equals redistribution. But for any rational person, redistribution is contrary to justice. Because justice is when everybody gets rewarded for the work they did, instead of just redistributing evenly without the regard for the actual input. And as a satirist, how many people have heard about the website thepeoplescube.com? All right, good, good. Has anybody posted anything there? Okay, what is the People's Cube? It's the cube of equality. Everybody knows what the Rubik's Cube is, right? So imagine a politically correct Rubik's Cube. This is it. It's all gloriously red. All sides are equal, all squares are equal, and also all players are equal. No matter how slow or how fast you are, how smart you are, all results are equal. It's guaranteed equality of results. The cube of equality. And it's also colorblind friendly. And this is the kind of the concept of the satirical website where we discuss the current events from the point of view of the Stalinist Politburo under the slogan, "We cure weak liberalism with strong communism." We show them where their ideas go to, lead to. I'll talk about that a little later, but right now, again, I wanted to share another personal story about socialized healthcare. We had it for free in the USSR. You could go to the clinic and not pay a penny to anybody. But not all doctors were created equal. And the doctors were some of the lowest paid people in the country, along with the teachers and engineers. There was a joke that why all the doctors work, why all the doctors work 1.5 shift in the USSR? That's because if they work 1 shift, they will have no money to eat. If they work 2 shifts, they would have no time to eat. So they work 1.5. And some doctors just gave up and stopped caring. And I had a stomach problem in the Soviet Union. I would always go to get into a hospital with a stomach problem, and it kept recurring, and nobody told me what the hell was wrong with me. So I tried to get the doctor's attention. I was placed in a room with about 20 other men, all with different diseases. We were all given one and the same yellow pill, and they didn't even tell me what that pill was. I kept asking, and they acted as if I wasn't there, as if I was transparent. The doctor, it was like the Soviet version of the Matrix. You know, take the yellow pill or the yellow pill. Choose wisely. And I tried to ask the doctor for an interview, for an appointment. I wanted to know what's wrong with me. And again, she acted as if I didn't exist. She never spoke a word to me. And I felt trapped. I thought, I'll never get rid of it, and there is no help. And I would rather go to a private doctor who would listen to me and pay the money. But the problem was that there were no private doctors. And then I thought, even if there were private doctors, I wouldn't have the money to pay them. And I thought, why? I'm working. Why can't I afford a private doctor? That's because the government is taking all my money from me in order to provide me with the free service. And so I was trapped. It was an economic trap. All these free services are economic traps. The same with the housing. Because once you have the right to housing, the government distributes you an apartment that is cheap. That's true. But you are assigned that address. You do not choose where you want to live, in what area or in what city. You are assigned an apartment. The stamp goes to your internal passport with that address, and you can't move anywhere. And you were lucky even to get that, because there were people who waited for 20 years in line to get an apartment. And they kept living. There were no homeless, but they lived with their parents and grandparents, and the children would get married and still kept living in the old apartment, like 2-room apartment, 3 generations of people, and they would have a baby, and they still would keep living in the same apartment. That was the result of this government, the right to housing, the right to education. We couldn't choose what to teach our children. The government was indoctrinating them through the universal program that was approved in Moscow, and that's it. You had no choice, but it was free. Now, and that's what's happening here with the Department of Education. The Federal Department of Education exists in order to create a centralized program of indoctrination, instead of different states having their own systems and see which one works better, as it was originally created. Same with all the other rights. The right to work I already mentioned. If there is a right to work, then everybody has to work. You can't avoid that. And if you didn't work for a short time, it was tolerated. But if you deliberately avoided employment for a government company, because there were no private companies, all companies were government companies. If you avoided work, you would have a visit from the police, and they would tell you, give you a warning. If you don't get employment, you would get, you would be assigned. They would give you an assignment. Show up at 7 a.m. at the railroad station, unload the rail cars. Or show at this corner at like 6:30 a.m. We'll give you the broom. You'll be sweeping the streets. And if you didn't do that, the next step is jail. The so-called labor therapeutic facility, or labor camp, in other words. So that's the right to work for you. Anyway, all these beautiful things about rights. I didn't understand why Americans who were supposed to be appreciative of the freedoms that they have are not immune to the leftist ideas. I couldn't understand it. At first I was wondering, I was asking questions, I started writing them down, so I can read some of them to you now. Like for instance, why those who demand equal pay for equal work never protest against equal pay for little or no work. Or ever wondered why we, for 30 years we have been we're being told that we have less than 10 years to save the planet. Or if all opinions are equally valid, why are conservatives always wrong? And if all cultures are equal, why doesn't UNESCO organize International Cannibalism Week festivals? And how come a liberal who disagrees with a conservative is open-minded, but a conservative who disagrees with a liberal is a bigot? What else? Why is a cloud of deadly gases over a volcano magnificent, but a smokestack over an American factory is ugly and harmful? And let's see. Why does Hollywood always glamorize drug addicts, criminals, liberal Democrats, and mentally challenged people? What do all they have in common? And why does Hollywood always find a good side in thugs, but never in business people? What was the last time? What was the last movie that featured a self-reliant, industrious man as a role model? And if cutting the middleman makes things cheaper, why are we paying the government to regulate the markets? And if a politician gets elected by the poor on a promise to eliminate poverty, wouldn't fulfilling his promise destroy his voting base? Isn't there a conflict of interest somewhere? Wouldn't he rather benefit from the growing numbers of poor people? And how did the war on poverty end? Has there been a peace treaty or a ceasefire? Who is the occupying force and who are the insurgents? And I guess we are the insurgents here.
Yes.
And you can read more of these on if you go to thepeoplescube.com. Now, humor is a very strong weapon, and I believe that humor and satire, political satire, was very instrumental in bringing down the communist system in the USSR. I personally knew a lot of political jokes from that period, and when I came to the States, I was trying to tell them to my American friends, but oftentimes they didn't understand me, and I realized that it wasn't because of the language differences, but because they just didn't understand the socio-political context, the realities. But the more we're moving towards what I call the progressive world of next Tuesday, the more old Soviet jokes are becoming translatable. Because Americans are now living in the same situation, oftentimes. With, like, the media is using code words, they're using double language, and lying to us in our eyes, and telling us about things that don't exist. And we'll know when we read that they're telling us lies, and we kind of oftentimes give up and don't even protest. We just take it for granted that the media would lie to us and we won't believe it. So here's a joke. My favorite joke from the USSR times was this. It was called the 6 Contradictions of Socialism in the USSR. There is no unemployment, and yet no one is working. No one is working, yet the production quotas are fulfilled. The production quotas are fulfilled, yet the stores are empty. The stores are empty, yet everybody has everything at home. Everybody has everything at home, yet everybody is unhappy. Everybody is unhappy, yet the voting is always unanimous. And now it's time for me to start writing jokes about the contradictions of socialism in the United States of America, because we've reached that point. So I wrote one here. Here goes. America is capitalist and greedy, yet half of the population is subsidized. Half of the population is subsidized, yet they think they're victims. They think they're victims, yet their representatives run the government. Their representatives run the government, yet the poor keep getting poorer. The poor keep getting poorer, yet they have all the things that people in other countries can only dream about. They have all the things that people in other countries can only dream about, yet they want America to be more like those other countries. When I first came to America, I felt as if I had taken a time machine from the past into the future. I saw this beautiful futuristic society with the things I had never even imagined existed. And again, the more we're getting closer to the progressive world of next Tuesday, the more I'm beginning to feel that I've taken a time machine from the future into the past. I have already seen that future, and I ran away. And so that's why I'm trying to, just being a satirist is my natural state of mind. So that's why I'm writing satire. And people are attracted to my work because politics oftentimes can be very depressing, especially if it's not going your way. And I sell a t-shirt on my website that says, "Obama is the reason why I drink." And so this is something that I would advise everybody to do once in a while, and check out my website and get some good mood out of some bad stuff. Now, what's happening in New York right now with the Occupy Wall Street movement? I hear they're even now turning the liberals away from themselves with the stuff they're doing. And I already mentioned that political theater group Communist Fakeri. So the same guy, also an immigrant like me, but from Ireland, Brian McCarthy, he's a good friend, he has a brilliant sense of humor. He came up with the idea of Communist Fakeri back then. Now he came up with the idea of Liberate Wall Street instead of Occupy Wall Street. So unfortunately I didn't have time to work on that much. I just created a few posters for people to print out, and some of the slogans are this protest is brought to you by billionaire George Soros. And basically, actually what the idea is to have people come there and get media attention with signs that have completely different meaning, or create panic in their midst. For instance, the moment he created a website, Liberate Wall Street on Facebook, the Occupy Wall Street people started sending each other messages and discussing it on their internet forums. The evil conservatives are trying to destroy us through this new group. It must be a powerful group financed by some dark forces, as usual, because they are themselves, the professional left always gets good finances, though they imagine that the opponents are also always good, have good financial backing. Now, my friend made the address on Facebook for that organization, fictional organization, as 40 Wall Street. And he did it just, first of all, it's because it's Wall Street address, and second, it's because it's a beautiful old building that he liked when he lived in, he now moved out of New York. I still live there, like feeling as if I'm a undercover agent in an occupied territory. But so he put that address there, and these progressives started discussing and finding out on the forum who exactly could be behind this. They gave a list of organizations registered at that building. Then they found out that that building is owned by Donald Trump. And then immediately an article appeared somewhere on the liberal website, and it had like 200 comments the same day. Donald Trump organizes opposition to Occupy Wall Street. So Donald Trump is behind the effort. And that's hilarious, because these people are not rational, otherwise they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. And so it's easy to fool them. They're easily fooled, they're gullible, and it's easy to spread panic, and they're paranoid too. So what my friend is doing, he's posting fake messages on that Facebook saying, okay, all agents take their positions in Chicago and New York. Don't put your SCIU t-shirts yet. Stuff like that. So I create some signs that say, we get our orders from MSNBC, we haven't watched in 6 months, everybody should be guaranteed a degree in rocket science, my parents pay for everything, if this were Tiananmen Square, we'd be under a tank right now. Denounce capitalism with Facebook and Twitter on your iPhone. No need to clean up, my mom usually does that. And stuff like that. But these people are misguided and too misinformed to realize that a government big enough to give you everything they need is a government big enough to take away everything that you have. And of course this Thomas Jefferson's quote was never taught to them, because we all know the state of education. But whatever they're doing can only be done because they feel there is moral support from the locals, from the local government, and from the media. And even the same bankers that they're opposed concede that the stand of the Occupy Wall Street crowd is moral. And that is the reason why they are moving so fast, so forward. We need to deprive them of their moral high ground. It's not a moral high ground, it's a heap of garbage. And we need to show that, because their position is not moral at all. It's this collectivist moral code that has penetrated the society and that's creating the preconditions for all this destruction that is going on. Mayor Bloomberg was very lenient with them. Now one of the Occupy Wall Street people climbed on one of those ugly statues, modernist metal statues in Zuccotti Park in New York, and he says he's not coming down until Mayor Bloomberg resigns. So a big surprise for Mayor Bloomberg. And that's a lesson to all of them. You give them a finger, they bite off your hand. Now, and we know that whoever owns the language owns the debate, and the words that they use in their debate have been carefully designed by their liberal think tanks. So they never say actually what they want. It's all cryptic. They use all the kind words. And like somebody on my website suggested that we should, like, the liberals, instead of saying socialism, which is scary, should rather use the word compassionate capitalism. And then one of the leading forces of that movement is the Working Families Party, which is basically disguised communists. And workers' parties sound also a little scary, because we all know that the Nazis were National Socialist Workers' Party, and the Communist Party in the USSR originally was the Workers' Party. It was called the RSDRP, the Russian Social Democrat Workers' Party. Then a lot of other communist movements were called Workers' Parties. So, but if you choose the word working families, that sounds completely different. Who would be against the working families? They represent us all. We're all working families. I suggested that why don't we start changing our proverbs? We can, instead of the early bird gets the worm, we can change it to an early worm gets the bird, which would more thoroughly reflect the reality. Let me see, I just recently wrote this on the People's Cube. This is the most brilliant allegory of social justice as we mean it. The current generation of birds and their offspring must bear the collective burden of guilt and sacrifice for the historical injustice inflicted on the worms of the past. Taking it further, we can talk of criminal global conspiracy of birds of all feathers, whose goal was further to oppress the worms and keep them powerless and alienated. In part, they did it with proverbs like the one in question. Whoever invented it did it on purpose in order to reinforce the elevated ruling position of the birds and to encourage them to wreck the lives of the oppressed worms and their working families, so that there would never be the light in the end of their tunnel. So, anyway, this is changing, and to make it short, the PC way of looking at it is to encourage worms to fly high and wreck the lives of birds who are now being forced by our social conditioning to stay low under the weight of their unbearable guilt and to crawl and dig holes in the earth instead. But the worms can't fly, but if we have the media on our side in Hollywood, we can create an impression that the worms can fly. We can create a picture of a superworm, and he's now in the White House. In my, what?
Any questions maybe from the audience?
Any questions so far? Well, we'll have a Q&A. Do you think it's time for the Q&A?
Well, we usually end about 7:30, and it is 7:30, so
Oh, okay.
some people plan.
I'll stop whenever you told me. Okay. Yes.
I want to know how you got away from that communist type environment.
Oh, actually it was pretty painless, because I already got out after the fall of the USSR. The problem then was to get into America, because previously the problem was to get out. After the fall of the USSR you can get out, but it's harder to get in, because now the American side has created obstructions. And the immigration system in America needs reforming very badly, because it has been designed by Ted Kennedy, who has been sitting on that immigration committee for 25 years, and it's all geared towards multiculturalism. Just recently, I read a news story, some tens of thousands of Iranians recently received green cards through a green card lottery, which is a multicultural endeavor to bring more people who are underrepresented in the United States population, which means, in other words, bring the third world countries who are less likely to integrate into American society and assimilate, instead of people who want, I mean, in every third world country there are hardworking people who could assimilate, but that green card lottery is something different. Now, it's easier for some to get here, and it's harder for others. For people like me, or for people from Europe, it's almost impossible. They can't just come and, to the American consulate and say, we would like to become American citizens. No, they won't. I have friends in France and in other European countries who would like to come to America, but they can't. I mean, they can come as guests. That's what I did. I came on a guest visa, then I found an employer, a Russian company who needed a translator, and then I changed my visa to a working status, and so on, but it was a very long and painful and costly process. At the same time, there are these refugee programs, and I can tell you this a little bit about the refugees from the USSR. There are all different people. Some are hardworking, some are not. Some have learned how to work the system back in the USSR, and they keep working it here. Others don't want to do that. They want to live as honest people in a decent society. So you can't paint everybody with a broad brush. But the thing is that as refugees, Soviet Jews were receiving special grants and welfare and medical care and subsidized apartments, right? Like in New York, at least, I know a lot of people in the New York Russian language community. And what they're telling, oftentimes it helped them, but I hear now stories that some of those people who came here as educated professionals who were hoping to make a good living here and become somebody, received welfare, received subsidized apartments. And by the time they graduated whatever classes they took in English and other professional training, they figured that if they get a real job, then they would lose their subsidized apartment and they would lose all other benefits. So why bother? And so instead of moving on professionally, they chose to work in some stores as store clerks or some other places where they would get paid in cash under the table without paying taxes, while at the same time continuing to live off the government expense. And now, like 30 years later, all those people are very unhappy with their lives. They regret, some regret that they even moved here, and they don't like this country either, because they haven't achieved anything. They say, oh, what, you're telling us that America is this country of opportunity. No, you see, we've been here for 30 years, we have nothing. And, you know, in one book on bringing up children, I learned that the more the parents spoil their children with their unconditional love, the more they give them, the more likely the children will grow up losers, incapable to protect themselves, and incapable to succeed in life. And the first people that they will blame for it will be their parents. They will hate their parents. And that explains to me why there are so many America-hating liberals here. They had such a good life. They grew up as losers without any need to struggle in their lives. And now they hate the country that gave this all to them, because they're such losers, and they're relaying their problems on somebody else, as usual, as these people do. Okay, that's enough on immigration, right? Let's have other questions. Yes, please.
This morning I read in the paper that 5 organizations had applied to be in a charter school in Sarasota County. One of them is the School for Social Justice. And they want the children to be more involved in their community, to volunteer, and to know the political system better. So maybe Dr. Schweier can look into it.
Now, Dr. Schweier, it's your turn. You raised your hand first.
Well, no, that's right. I think that this is a very important question because there's 5 charter schools being considered. One of them is the School for Social Justice, which is exactly what Oleg is speaking out against, because social justice is nothing but code for socialism and in its worst form, communism.
Right. Well, communism, I like the expression that socialist is a communist without a gun. And if, I don't know, if we'll have a little more time, I could explain the difference and this, what Karl Marx put what meaning Karl Marx put into the words socialism and communism, and what classical Marxism is about, and the different types of socialism, and how Marxists view the development of the society, if we have time. So, any more questions?
There was one interesting quote you had in your book, and it said it was about an old Russian, I guess, former Soviet saying, "They pretend to pay us and we pretend to work." Can you explain that?
Exactly. Well, I touched on that a little bit when we when I was talking about the not wanting to work harder when everything is shared. Now, let's see. One of the original ideas of the revolution in Russia was that once the factories are taken away from the owners and given to the workers would start working harder because they work for themselves, and they would start doing all the innovations, and the productivity would soar, and we would have the abundance of everything. And that is part of the original communist plan. The original Marxist idea is that there are 3 preconditions to communism, and one of them is this increase in production that will be caused by this socialist labor relations. That never happened, because without economic incentive, workers just stop working, and everything starts falling apart. And that's hence the joke that they pretend they're paying us, we pretend we're working. Yes.
I'm intrigued by some of the things you've touched on about day-to-day life, from literally the time you're born, I guess, until you die. You are sort of a ward of the state. They know where you are and
Yes.
control. There's no opportunity for, let's say, a rebellious teenager to sort of go off the reservation, to get off the grid, to go underground and...
Right now, no, there wasn't. Right now, the system is different. So what I'm telling you, the country as I saw it when it was ruled by the Communist Party, Russia and other, Ukraine and other former republics of the USSR have changed very much since then. And they have a lot of things that the Western countries have, not always the best things. And political correctness is now moving there also. Liberalism, all these liberal ideas are moving in. George Soros has established branches of his Open Society Institute there. Fortunately, you know, I would never be for any kind of dictatorship, but in this case, Putin is doing the right thing. He's not allowing political correctness to run wild. And he is trying to put Soros establishments out of business in Russia.
So should we be glad?
Because he's
then
afraid of the color revolution.
So should we
coming
be
to
glad then that Putin looks like he's coming right back to where he started?
No, we shouldn't. What I'm saying is just one of the effects. You know, sometimes every cloud has a silver lining. The system that was created in Russia right now can only be described as crony capitalism.
And they do not, yes, there is still support for old communist rule. There is a strong communist party, and their leader, Zyuganov, is part of the Russian parliament, the Duma. But they have very little chance of getting elected. What happens is that Putin keeps everybody on the short leash. The wealth has been distributed in the country in a way that mostly the big oligarchs, a small group of people, hold all the money. And Putin can put any one of them in jail if they go against him. And that's why Khodorkovsky is now sitting in jail, because he was one of the oligarchs who started to go into politics and be against Putin. So he made a case out of it. Now, it's like a saying, see what happened to him? If you oppose me, you'll be next. In the meantime, enjoy your life, steal all you want, transfer the Russian wealth to the Swiss banks, all you want, as long as you share. You bring me the money, you bring my friends the money, and you want to be rich, here is a hole in the pipeline. I'll put you in charge of that hole, and you can siphon as much as you want, just as long as you share. That's the system, and he's not going to give it up. And it's not socialism, it's not communism, it's not Marxism, it's just kleptocracy. So that's the current Russian regime. And so whatever, people can say anything they want. There is freedom of speech, yes, and but that doesn't mean anything. That people still have no, whatever people say has absolutely no effect on the government or what the government does. And because they say anything they want, there are so many wild ideas and conspiracy theories and all the irrational thinking floating around that it's unbelievable.
Have you given any thought to reviving your satire against Obama as you did Communist for Kerry? Because we have a president who is incited class warfare, and yet goes to billionaires in Silicon Valley and actually has taken a lot of money from Wall Street and Hollywood. And the average person doesn't know this, and the media won't report it. So
a lot of my
what do you
satire
think
is
about
directed
that?
against Obama. The street theater, I'm kind of the professional left gets a lot of funding and they can do it as a full job. We are the amateur right. We don't get the funding. And I need to make a living. And now I'm near broke. So I can't afford to be in a political theater right now. I can help all I want. I can create posters, I can think up ideas, but I'm not going to the street because I need to pay for my children's education and pay my own bills too. The last, if you go to the People's Cube, there is a column on the right-hand side that's called "News We Don't Have to Write About," and there are stories consisting of headlines mostly. So one of the recent headlines is "Democrats to Wall Street occupiers: we support you, but don't harass our biggest donors."
Could you please comment, and perhaps you touched on this in your description of how the government operates, but what we've heard about a huge black market in the Soviet Union, during the time it was closed, and then that actually growing into an industry once it became open, and the Russian mob, so to speak, and trade underground of items, drugs, everything else that's illicit and desirable.
Right. Well, yes, black market was an integral system of a socialist society where everything is owned by the government, and therefore there is a shortage of everything, and whatever government companies produced was of bad quality, so you could buy some really bad pants for 10 rubles in a government store, or you could go to the black market and buy some imported suit or pants for much more money. And a pair of blue jeans like Levi's was 200 rubles in my time, which was, and my salary is like at the time I was a translator at a research institute. I was getting $120 per month, rubles per month. That was my salary, and the jeans were $200. There was also a market for rock and roll records, and I was a fan of rock music. An LP, like a new LP that would come out, would be something like 60 rubles, which was half of the month's salary. I was surviving by making tapes from my friends' records. And I was just listening to copies and copies of copies. That's how music traveled. People would just make tape copies and then make copies of copies. And they were often of very bad quality. And only now when I came to this country, I was able to actually hear the words in some of the songs that I liked. Now, are we?
Oh,
So,
I just, I
the
can't.
mafia will be next. I mean, later.
I just think we've been so blessed to have you here with us. I think you're so knowledgeable. Your experience, thank God, is something we will never experience. I think we will go to the People's Cube. I think we can all help him out by buying a book, whether it's for you or your relative or your neighbor or somebody who wasn't able to come tonight. I recommend that you purchase one of Oleg's books that are right up here. He will be glad to, autograph it for you. We also have some petitions up here for you to sign if you didn't sign one at Jerome Corsi's. And those of you who did not sign in tonight, please do so. And we would love to have you back, but time is short and we're getting hungry.